Hey everyone, ready for a story? This one's got brutality and betrayal, and a legacy that's still felt today. You probably know the name Tupac from hip-hop.
Uh,
We're going way back to 18th century South America to meet Tupac Amaru II, a revolutionary who took on the entire Spanish Empire. Picture South America under Spanish rule. It's the 1700s, and the indigenous people are living under a system. Well, it's basically designed to exploit them. Heavy taxes, forced labor, you name it.
and it's getting worse, right? Spain's rolling out these Bourbon reforms, trying to squeeze even more wealth out of their colonies, new taxes, stricter control, so they were trying to provoke a rebellion.
Yeah, so into this pressure cooker steps Tupac Amaru II. And here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't just some random guy who just snapped. His real name was Jose Gabriel Condor Conqui, and he was actually a descendant of Inca royalty. But more than that, this guy was educated in Jesuit schools, fluent in Spanish and Latin, a scholar of Inca and Spanish culture. He was a respected local leader, a curaca, working within the system to try and improve things for his people.
Which makes his decision to rebel even more fascinating, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't some hothead. He knew the risks. He tried working within the system. But clearly, it wasn't enough. Something pushed him over the edge.
Yeah, so it wasn't just that he rebelled, it's the name he chose, Tupac Amaru II. Why was that so powerful?
Well, think back to 1572. The Spanish had just conquered the Inca Empire, and they executed the last Inca emperor, Tupac Amaru. So when Jose Gabriel takes that name, he's not just rebelling, he's resurrecting the Inca spirit of resistance. It's a direct challenge to Spanish authority and a powerful symbol for the indigenous people to rally around.
And rally they did. November 4th, 1780, the rebellion explodes onto the scene. They capture Antonio de Arriaga, a notoriously cruel Spanish official. We're not just talking taxes here. This guy was known for his brutality. For example, he was notorious for forcing indigenous people to work in dangerous silver mines with no regard for their safety. And they score some early victories on the battlefield, too, places like Sangara. This wasn't just a symbolic uprising. They were winning.
These victories were huge. They proved that the rebels could actually stand up to the Spanish military. And that's when Tupac Amaru II makes a really bold move. He decides to lay siege to Cusco.
Now, Cusco wasn't just some random city, right?
No, Cusco was the heart of the Inca Empire.
Yeah.
It was a city of immense cultural and political significance, so attacking it was a direct shot at the Spanish. Imagine the shockwaves that sent through the colonial administration.
So they're on a roll. They've got momentum.
Yeah.
They're winning battles. They're laying siege to the former Inca capital. This is where things get really interesting.
Right.
Because you think this is their moment.
Right, except it's not. Despite some early success, the siege of Cusco ultimately fails.
Yeah.
Logistical issues, internal conflicts within the rebel forces, and the fact that Cusco was well fortified all played a part. The Spanish, initially caught off guard, were able to regroup and fiercely defend the city. And this is where we see a recurring and tragic theme in colonial conquests, betrayal.
Yeah. Enter Francisco Santa Cruz, also known as Pacaha, a key figure who ends up switching sides. It makes you wonder, how did the Spanish manage to turn people against Tupac Amaru II when his cause seemed so strong?
Well, the Spanish were masters of exploiting existing divisions within indigenous populations. They'd offer promises of power, land, even just survival, to turn leaders against each other. It's a tactic that highlights the immense challenges of resisting a powerful and cunning colonizer.
So betrayal is swirling around him, the siege of Cusco has failed, and eventually, Tupac Amaru II is captured. This must have been a crushing blow for the rebellion.
Absolutely. Tupac Amaru II was a brilliant strategist and a charismatic leader. His capture demoralized the rebel forces and gave the Spanish a much-needed advantage. They knew they had to make an example of him.
This is where it gets pretty brutal. They bring him to the main square in Cusco. And it's not just him. They drag his family there too, his wife, his sons, others who are close to him, and they force him to watch as they are executed, one by one. Why would the Spanish resort to such a horrific public display?
Terror. They wanted to send a very clear message. Anyone who dared to challenge Spanish authority would meet the same fate. They thought that by completely crushing the rebellion and making a gruesome example of its leader, they could extinguish the flames of resistance.
Wow, that's heavy. But you have to wonder, did it work? Did it really crush the spirit of rebellion? Or did it have the opposite effect?
That's the fascinating thing about this story. The Spanish thought they were ending things, but in a way, they were just getting started. Remember, Tupac Amaru II had tapped into a deep well of resentment and a yearning for freedom. You can't just execute an idea, especially one as powerful as that.
Right, so
Yeah.
even though his rebellion was ultimately put down, It wasn't the end of the story.
Not at all. Tupac Amaru II's name became synonymous with resistance. His image was everywhere in the whispers of the people, in the stories they told. His rebellion may have been crushed, but the seeds of discontent had been sown, and they were starting to grow.
So what happened next? Did those seeds actually blossom into something bigger?
They did. The rebellion of Tupac Amaru II became a source of inspiration for other uprisings, both large and small, throughout the Andes. Indigenous communities, emboldened by his defiance, continued to resist Spanish rule. It's almost like his death was a catalyst.
Right.
Even in defeat, he sparked something the Spanish couldn't extinguish.
You might be surprised to learn that Tupac Amaru II's influence wasn't limited to the Andes. His rebellion sent shockwaves across the world. People in Europe and North America, especially those who were fighting for their own freedoms, were inspired by his story.
Think about figures like Simón Bolívar and José de San Martín, the great liberators of South America. Their movements, though decades later, drew inspiration from those who came before them, including Tupac Amaru II. They proved that even in the face of overwhelming odds, freedom is a cause worth fighting for.
It's amazing how an event from the 1700s can still resonate so powerfully today.
That's the power of legacy. It's not just about what happens in one lifetime, but about the enduring impact it has on future generations. Tupac Amaru II became more than just a man. He became a symbol of resistance against oppression, and that symbol continues to inspire people today.
Yeah. When we started this deep dive, we talked about how you might know the name Tupac from hip-hop. And it's true. Tupac Amaru II has found his way into modern art, music, and literature.
It's incredible, isn't it? From murals in the streets of Lima to hip-hop lyrics in the United States, his image and his struggle continue to inspire artists and activists around the world. He's become a cultural icon, a symbol of indigenous pride, and a reminder of the power of resistance.
So, while the rebellion may have been militarily defeated, the spirit of Tupac Amaru II lived on. But how? And what can we learn from his story about the fight for justice, the impact of colonialism, and the enduring power of a single act of defiance? We'll explore those questions and more when we come back.
We're back, and I gotta say, learning about Tupac Amaru II has been a real eye-opener. Makes you realize that history isn't just dates and names. It's about real people fighting for what they believe in, even against impossible odds.
And sometimes, even when those fights seem lost, they can plant seeds that grow into something much bigger. That's what's so powerful about Tupac Amaru II's story.
Right. His rebellion might have been crushed, but it forced the Spanish Empire to confront, well, some pretty uncomfortable truths about their colonial system.
You're right. Think about it. The Spanish crown had been extracting wealth from the Americas for centuries. It was a system built on exploitation. And Tupac Amaru II's rebellion exposed that for the world to see. They couldn't just sweep it under the rug anymore. So did his rebellion actually make things worse for indigenous people? Like, did the Spanish crack down even harder because of it?
That's a good question. And there's no easy answer. In the short term, the Spanish definitely increased their efforts to control the indigenous population, but they also had to make some concessions, mostly to try and appease the elite within the colonies. Remember, even some of the Spanish colonists were starting to question the brutality of the system.
So this one rebellion in the Andes had ripple effects all the way back in Spain.
Absolutely. And not just Spain. News of Tupac Amaru II's rebellion traveled across Europe and the Americas. It inspired revolutionary thinkers who saw parallels between his struggle and their own fights against oppressive rulers. It became a global symbol of resistance.
Which brings us to the big question. Did Tupac Amaru II's rebellion actually fail? I mean, on the surface, it seems like it did. He was captured, executed, the Spanish stayed in power, but his legacy clearly lived on. So how do we measure success in a situation like that?
Well, it's a question worth pondering. Because if we define success solely by military victory, then yes, the rebellion failed. But if we look at the long-term impact, the way his story continued to inspire generations to fight for justice and equality, then it's a different story altogether.
It's almost like by trying to erase him.
Yeah.
The Spanish made him even more powerful.
Exactly. They tried to make an example of him, to scare people into submission. But instead, they created a martyr, a symbol of hope that transcended time and borders.
So the next time you hear the name Tupac, remember, there's more to the story than what you might find in a history book. There's a legacy of resistance, a fight for justice that continues to this day.
And maybe, just maybe, learning about Tupac Amaru II will inspire you to dig a little deeper into the untold stories of history, to uncover those hidden legacies that continue to shape our world.
That's it for our deep dive into the fascinating story of Tupac Amaru II. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep this spirit of curiosity alive.